What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on Prodigious Customs. I'm Jason Stoltz, and today we're diagnosing the check engine light, the P0340 code of the camshaft position sensor circuit. We just did all the head and a whole bunch of stuff to make it run right, and it's not happy. So I want to take you through the steps of what I found, because it took me about 3-4 days of just beating my head against the wall trying to figure this out. Well, with enough parts and enough input from other people, I searched forums. There was no good information that I could find, and it was really frustrating. So I want to show you what I figured out, the mistake I made along the way, and give you all that information so that if you do the rebuild yourself and you end up with this check engine code, I want to take you through the steps to be able to figure it out on your own without having to take it somewhere just like I did. It just takes a little bit of time, and hopefully I can help cut your time almost to nothing by just looking at this video and figuring it out. So I want to show you what it takes to diagnose this code. Alrighty, so the first thing we want to check is obviously our cam position sensor. So let's go ahead and pop this off. Okay, and we got our two wires in here, or two prongs rather, and we're going to go ahead and check for continuity or resistance. Actually, you're going to need yourself a voltmeter. I have this one from Home Depot, and it doesn't matter whether it's a real expensive voltmeter or the free one you can get from Harbor Freight. They'll all work. What you need to do is come over here to resistance, and you're going to check the resistance between those. It should be somewhere around 1,000. I believe the range for the cam sensor, and I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, but it should be about 800 to 1,200. So checking this sensor, hopefully, can you see that maybe? Is just over 1,000, 1,073. So that tells us that this sensor is good. We have no issues. All right, next thing we want to check for is continuity from this wire to our ECU, and I want to show you how to do that. First things first, we need to get access to the pins in the back of the computer. So 2 10s. Alrighty, here we have the engine control computer, the ECM. This controls everything that goes on in the engine. We'll give you your check engine lights all through this very guy right here. All right, everybody, I want to show you the wires involved in your cam circuit. So we know there's a blue and a black and white wire that come directly off the connector. So we come over here and we're searching through all our blue wires, solid blue, to find it. Well, I can tell you that it's second row, second one in. This blue wire is to your cam sensor. Well, you try to check this white and black one right here below it, and you get no signal. Well, that's because it's not it. It is directly related to this cream one. Something important to know about this white or cream wire on the bottom row, bottom left, is that it is also connected to your crank position. So that is to say that the crank and the cam are on a similar circuit. They both use a pin out of the ECU to tell them the signal. So now this brown wire right here is our cam circuit. Sorry, our crank. So this brown wire right here is the crank position circuit. Okay, second row, farthest left. So you can check for continuity between the blue and the cam wire. You can check for brown to the crank sensor, and you can check this white wire to the black and white on the cam and to the white on the crank. So let's go ahead and do that. Now that you know which wires we're dealing with, you can be able to know for sure to check the backs of these to them and make sure that you have continuity. If you don't have continuity, that means you have a broken wire between the ECU and your sensor. You're gonna have to trace that out, figure out where it's broken, and replace it, or solder it, or whatever it's gonna take to fix that wire. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and check our continuity between our blue wire on our cam sensor. So just push that in there. Don't force it, don't do anything. You're just needing to touch it to know that you're making good contact. Come over here to second row, second wire in from the left. And look at that, perfect. Oh, zeros. So that means there's no broken wire. It runs all the way in. Let's check our black and white wire now to this white wire, third row down, farthest left, and it is also minimal resistance, 0.1, which is nothing, means your wire, oh, there it goes, zeros, showing that your wire is not broken between here and here. Now, next thing to check is that that crank wire is not interfered, or you can also check between the black and white wire and your ground, and your blue and white wire and your ground. All right, so these wires, including the crank wire, they both go into a loom, a section of wire that's got insulation on it that has an exposed cable that runs the length of it. Basically, if you ever break a wire, it instantly shorts it out, gives you a check engine code, and you know there's an issue. So what you can do, since the computer is grounded out, unhook your connector, check between each wire, grab one of the wires, and touch it to these ground cables. See if you can see that. And there should be no continuity. If there is continuity, that means that you have a broken wire. So look at that. Beautiful. There is no sort of continuity between these wires and these grounds. All these ground cables are exposed, and they all join up here at the end to ground everything out. So you definitely do not want continuity between those two, which is fantastic. That's not what, if you have it, then it means that you have a broken wire in there that's making contact with that, shorting it out, and that's what's giving you your check engine light. So next, let's move down to the crank and check those wires as well. So the crank wire is actually found right here under the intake. It comes up in a loom, goes behind your AC compressor, up, and then it plugs in right here, this big black connector. The one next to it is your knock sensor. So we're gonna go ahead and pull off the connector here so we can check it for resistance. Alrighty, next wire we're gonna check is the crank, which is right here under the intake. It's plugged in. The one next to it's the knock sensor. So go ahead and unplug it. We're gonna test our brown wire to the ECU. So go ahead and put your probe on the brown wire. Then come over here to the ECU. Second row, first wire, farthest to the left. Make sure you get good contact on the back of the pin. There you go. Letting us know that the wire is not broke. Okay, let's jump to the other side, the white wire here. And go to the white wire on the bottom, third row down, farthest left, and check for continuity there. And we have it. So we know that these wires are not broken. Well, we better check and make sure that they are not broken somewhere in between and are grounding out. So go ahead and pop the connector back out of the ECU. Keep plugged into, let's say, the white wire for now. Check to the ground. These exposed cables over here on the blue connector, nothing. Switch wires, go to the brown and check, and nothing, which is good. That means the wires are okay between here and the ECU, 100%. So that you can check off. Okay, I don't have any broken wires. The sensor is good here. Well, what about the crank sensor? Is it good? Well, instead of taking the crank sensor out, test the crank position sensor for resistance, so ohms, and it should be somewhere between 1600 ohms and 2700 ohms cold. So you should be somewhere in that range. So you'll reach down, grab your black plug that you just undid to test. Your probes on each of these prongs in here. And we're at 2027, so well within the range of where we want to be. So that all checks out. All our sensors are good. All our wires are good. Now, let's go ahead and pop the valve cover off, and we will check the 3 teeth that belong on the cam position sensor, or that the cam position sensor reads rather. So we'll check, make sure they're not damaged. We can also check for resistance as that cam passes by. As those teeth pass by, you can have your probe attached here and see the fluctuation in your meter. Make sure that all 3 of your ears or lobes for your cam are on your cam. Make sure none of them have broken off or whatever the case may be. Next, you want to get a buddy or something and turn it over, and just with your probe for resistance, put them on here on your 2 pins. Rotate it over and make sure that the number jumps as these pins or lobes go by. If it does, that means there's no problem. Your cam isn't like breaking off underneath the cam cap or whatever. It is seeing the cam rotate and you have that signal. Another way to check your crank is when you fire up the car, if you are seeing an RPM signal, well, you're getting a good cam sensor, or a crank sensor rather. It is showing your RPMs, everything is working. Alrighty, next thing to check is your timing. So somewhere in 9 complete rotations of the chain, you should have your timing marks line up. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 links between your 2 dark ones. They might be yellow or whatever your replacement chain has. So make sure that at least your cams are in time, so they're reading correctly. The next thing to check is the crank, that your relation with top dead center, both of your cams on number 1 cylinder up in the air away from the valves, and that the crank is in the right position according to your cam. So let's check that. Alrighty, next thing to look for is down here where I'm shining the flashlight. You have your timing marks. There is a little groove in your harmonic balancer. It should line up with the 0 while your cams are lined up here, just like this. So if your cams look like that, your crank's at 0, you know that your car is in time. Okay, one last thing to check, and this is where I screwed up. Alrighty, let's go ahead and pull out the harmonic balancer bolt and the 10mm bolt for your crank sensor and slide it out of the way. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is rotate our motor over till our keyway is up here somewhere to be able to sense where our crank is at as far as this flat spot goes. You might have it flipped, which is telling the motor it is advanced from where it actually is. So let me get this motor cranked over a little bit. It's easier to do without the spark plugs, or you can put it in gear and rotate your tire over with it off the ground and it should spin it over. Once you have the motor to this point, line up your keyway and try and feel for your flat spot. If it's up there, or if you just still feel teeth because you can't get there, rotate your crank over just a little bit more so that it should line up. Now, if you're feeling a flat spot more down here instead of up here, you might have screwed up. What happened is when you reassembled the motor, and what happened is when I reassembled the motor, the crank position sensor gear is actually sitting in there like that. So if I reach down, oh, I feel a flat spot right here. Guess what? This gear should be with the F facing out. And I do not know how this happened, because if you watched the last video, you clearly see me slide it on the crank this way. At some point in time, I took it off for whatever reason. It got flipped around, and now the motor is reading advanced. So what's going on is the crank position sensor is seeing the cam position sensor way retarded compared to the advance of what the crank actually is. So it is sending a signal to the ECU, and they're not jiving, they're not happy, and it's saying, hold the phone, this can't be right. So what do? I go through all the steps, try and diagnose everything. Well, you know, somewhere in my subconscious, I slept on it, and in the morning I was like, you know what? I better check that. So I came home from work, and sure enough, that's where I made my mistake. So now I gotta go ahead and pull all the timing crap back off, get it on there right, flip it over, and put it all back together. It's not a super big deal, but it's just annoying that I'm this far along, everything is that right. So, to diagnose your P0340, and you just reassembled your motor, or somebody else says they did a timing job on it for you, this is a good place to check, because this is what I did. I have video evidence of me putting it on the right way, but somehow I still swapped them around. I hope this helps, and I'm gonna go ahead and end out this video with a time lapse of me fixing this situation. So going ahead and pulling it all back apart, and I hope you stick around. Alrighty guys, here's just another fun side note. So I saw a little bit of coolant on the ground, so I decided to check it out. So I pulled the air box out, and I noticed it was coming from up here somewhere. Well, I went to look, and I barely put any pressure on this here hose that goes into the radiator, and surprise, it broke. So, it's just the way these projects go, man. It's just, you keep digging and digging and opening cans of worms until you're done. And now it looks like I'll be swapping the radiator out of this stupid thing too. So, in the time lapse, I guess you'll be seeing that as well. Well, would you look at that? That's where I made a mistake. I don't know why I put it on this way, but I did, and I'm sorry. Caused myself a big old headache, and I know better. I should have known better, but yeah, I screwed up. See, we're all timed. That just goes to prove it. Let's get this thing on there the right direction with the F facing out. to not forget. All right, that's gonna do it. Let's get this thing put back together. All right, check it out. We're back together. Everything's happy, I'm hoping. But I went ahead and swapped out the radiator from that stupid little frickin' hose that I broke off. I went ahead and replaced the fan shrouds that had a chunk out of it. For whatever reason, I just swapped the whole thing. And then I went ahead and really deep cleaned the throttle body. There was a gasket in the set, and I had seen a video of how to deep clean it to get your idle lower and to, you know, get better air fuel to the motor so you're getting better mileage and everything like that. So, we're back together. Let's go ahead and try and fire this up and keep our fingers crossed. No check engine lights and a much lower idle. So let's check it out. We're already 1,000 RPM lower, it already idles better, and there's no check engine lights, so that's freaking fantastic. I just want to thank you all for watching the video, all the way to the end, especially you guys, so thank you so much, and have a great freaking day, and I'll see you on the next one.